Hello, and welcome to our presentation to you about proper business practices in Beijing, China. I'm Nick Sunderland. This is Dan Kaufmacher, Andrew Treolar, and Ben Zimmerman. Just a quick overview. We're going to go over the protocols, Chinese culture, and foreign corrupt policies. So first, you want to address your Chinese counterparts by their title. You want to start with the most senior member, as seniority is highly valued in China. And when you introduce yourself, you want to go company, your title, your last name, and then your first name. Unless the Chinese bow first, don't bow. It's shown as a sign of ignorance, and you may end up with an awkward situation like the one shown. Short handshakes show a sign of respect, and eye contact should be clear but not extended with the person you're shaking hands with. When you hand out your business cards, you want to hand them to the most senior member first. And also, having them translated in Chinese on the reverse side isn't the worst idea. Also, having a native speaker translate your name into Chinese shows initiative and that you're trying to make an impact on the people you're presenting to. Being late for a meeting is the absolute worst and most disrespectful thing that you can do in Chinese culture. When you enter meetings, you want to enter with the most senior member going first, followed by the people that are lower and lower until you get to the end. Always, the most senior person will take the lead chair, and usually there are name tags that are laid out that will let people know where to sit. Along with that, the senior members will also speak first, and then followed by whomever they delegate to speak next. And they will also introduce their whole staff. Interrupting is considered very rude, and it's also inappropriate. Questions should be held until the end of that person speaking. Just like in American practice, you want to treat everyone as equals, men and women. And you don't want to use jargon or slang because that could get misinterpreted by your Chinese counterpart. And then when all said and done, you want to let your Chinese counterpart leave first as a sign of respect. For dress attire, this is exactly what you want to look like as a man in Chinese culture. Western style suits are completely acceptable. And women want to avoid anything with a low neckline or that rides above the knees. And flashy jewelry is considered pretentious and inappropriate. You want to treat women like men in the office. That's the same thing as the American workplace. It's very normal for us. And Chinese culture actually dictates that in a social setting, men shouldn't come in direct physical contact with women. But in a business and professional setting, that is completely fine. Some problem areas between Chinese practices and American practices might be following a strict talking pattern, which in America you kind of talk when you're ready to talk, but in China you talk when it is your turn. Mostly it goes by hierarchy. American and Chinese interruptions are rude, but if you interrupt and bring up a good point, no one really has a problem with that, and the person speaking kind of goes on with what they're saying.
As Dick mentioned earlier, the formal way to introduce yourself is with a handshake. However, what most Americans don't realize is that the Chinese do not have the same standards of personal space. And so after the handshake, they might come closer to you and want to talk to you. And so, our instinct is to back up and to get our own personal space. However, they do not believe in as much personal space, and so they will still come after you. And so you need to realize, not necessarily come after you, but they will take a step towards you. And so you need to realize that they want to be close to you and that it is not offensive. But despite their need for close personal space, they do not like to be touched. And so it's not appropriate to hug them, slap them on the back, put your arm around their shoulder, etc. As far as during the actual business meeting, the Chinese may express little emotion or seem unfriendly. And this is a social norm called 社会正直. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but it means social status. And so pretty much they just want to be calm, they want to be focused, and they want to be attentive to you. And they're not going to be smiling and laughing at what you're saying. Also, eye contact is very important. Eye contact for them, like if they are staring at somebody, it means that they're curious. In our culture, if you're staring at somebody, it might make them feel uncomfortable. However, in their society, it means that they want to hear more about what you're saying. And also, remember that silence is golden. So a lot of Americans will just ramble on and talk whatever is on their minds because they want to break the silence. However, in Chinese, silence means that you're collecting your thoughts and that you're preparing yourself to speak in the future. As far as a few body motions, Pointing in American is usually referring to somebody. However, in Chinese, you're supposed to point with your palm out, and pointing with your finger can be very insulting. Also, laughter in American interpretation is happiness or amusement, whereas in Chinese, it's embarrassment or uncertainty. If there was a possible awkward situation, or if they didn't know how to react, then they might smile or laugh. Like I said earlier, staring at somebody is more of a curiosity thing than something that's impolite. Shushing somebody does not necessarily mean a call for silence. It actually means that they disagree with you and that they have something else to say back to you. And finger snapping, as we know, is calling for somebody's attention, pretty much the same as whistling at somebody, and for them that is also very insulting. As far as email goes, email is used very widely in business practices. Usually keep it short, direct, and to the point. However, some elderly people may not have the technical knowledge to use email, and so they might not be comfortable with it. Also, the Chinese are not fully confident in written messages, and so it's always important to follow up with either a phone call or like a meeting so you can talk to them in person. As the saying goes, 20 emails is the same as 5 phone calls, is the same as 1 meeting. And so they really value direct contact as opposed to written statements. As far as mobile phone use, Chinese landlines are usually unreliable and they won't be answered and they'll just ring forever. However, a lot of Chinese use their mobile phones all the time and they're there to be answered wherever, whenever. So whereas Americans think it's polite to not use your phone during dinner or during a meeting, the Chinese will answer their phone whenever it rings, no matter what the occasion. As far as texting goes, it is common in business practices to talk to your boss, to get business promotion messages out. However, like I said, written messages are not the same as direct statements. What Americans shouldn't do in a business meeting is say no to something. The Chinese do not like when you disagree with them. The better thing to do is to say, well, maybe, and propose another idea instead. Don't stray off topic. Like I said before, they like to keep everything on focus and to the point. Don't use excessive hand motions, point fingers, touch them at all. And lastly, do not leave the room first. It is very important for the Chinese, the senior person at the meeting to leave the room first, the other Chinese members to follow, and then for the Americans to finish.
So as Dan and Nick talked about some of the protocols that need to be followed when going on a business trip in China, really understanding like the meaning behind those reasonings and like the culture of China, is important into actually following through with implementing those protocols. So Confucianism is one of the main practices in China, and really the Chinese have a sense of belonging and unity. So like Dan and Nick said, age and rank is very respected, and conservative dress, so everyone dressing very similarly and being modest is very important. But one of the things that Dan mentioned that is very important, and one of the things that distinguishes China from the Eastern world and America very much so, is saving face. And I'll talk about this in the next slide more. So basically what saving face means in China is if someone, say I were to go to China and try and book a hotel, but the hotel doesn't really give foreigners like myself a room, they would just say, no, we don't have any rooms left, even if they did. So like in China, it's lying is almost an acceptable thing to do, saying yes or maybe, or just sort of fronting. And the reason that this is so is because they look at it as more of a shame thing, whereas Americans or the Eastern world look at it as guilt. So we see objectivity where they see shame, and that's more of like the relationship-based aspect and the situational side of things. So they want to always make sure that they're not going to be embarrassed or they're not going to disappoint someone, so they save face by saying maybe or even lying at some points. So when you go to China and maybe you know that they're lying or you know that they're trying to save face, don't be offended. That's just the differences in between cultures. And so also one of the keys when going across to China during a business is diversity and cultural awareness and having these understandings. So a them versus us attitude is very important. And in the end, it's a business trip, and the Chinese are all about doing business and negotiating. Business is definitely distinguished from friendship, whereas friendship is a warm welcoming. Now, that's not to say don't be impolite or don't be friendly, but at the same time, getting down to business is one of the main focal points that you want to make sure you follow.
And not only do we have to follow many protocols, but there are also many laws that we have to follow as well. And the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act is one of these laws, which basically addresses bribery of foreign officials, which isn't acceptable at all and can cause a lot of punishments. And this applies to anyone acting on behalf of the firm, which could be the employee itself or even the manager or a third party that they're using to communicate. And some of these violations are considered making a payment, which is considered a bribe, and this bribe does not necessarily have to be a monetary value, but anything that can be considered valuable. And even having a third party make this bribe for you, you can still get in trouble along as a third party. And some of these punishments can be rather harsh and include fines up to $2 million and imprisonment up to 5 years. But one of the worst things that could happen, it might not affect you in general, but your company, is that it will bring negative publicity to your company and can damage your reputation, because anytime these laws are broken, they're always on the news and talk about your company being involved, and that would definitely damage your reputation as a company. Something you can do to help these is these compliance programs, which will help detect and prevent improper payments by your employees. And if you are part of one of these programs, the penalties will be lower if something accidentally happened that you did not intentionally make a bribe. It shows that you are trying to follow this act and respect it and did not necessarily mean to make that bribe. And in general, carrying business out in China can be pretty hard. And whenever you're carrying it out, because they're always looking for bribes with foreign officials, and you want to make sure that your potential clients you're talking to understand the importance of the FCPA, and that at times they're willing to sign contracts to show that they're acknowledging these regulations. And if your client does try to offer a bribe with you, or they're not willing to sign these contracts, then you should not do business with these clients and look elsewhere for someone else to do business with.
So in conclusion, by following basic protocol, understanding the Chinese laws, and abiding by international and local laws, that will allow our company to be as successful as possible in the future. Following what we have presented to you will ensure that our Chinese partner will trust us, and it will show that we truly value the business with them. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Those are